Okay, final step is we're going to create our client, and the client is basically going to get a token from the secure token service, and then it's going to take that token and hand it off to the call to the real web service that we're calling our provider, and it's going to return a user object that we're going to print the email address out. And all of this should be happening over a secure communication. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so here we are in NetBeans. We're going to need to look at this in a second, as you'll find out. So let's go ahead and create a new project. All we're doing this time is creating a command line Java project to run this. It could be a web, it doesn't have to be. The command line side is just sometimes a little bit easier to deal with. Okay, we're going to call this WS Client. That's really all we need. Nothing fancy going on. Okay, the first thing we want to do is set up our libraries and get our Metro libraries loaded up. There we go. Metro, import, add. Okay, this time we don't have to worry about it bundling it up because we're going to just run it right from NetBeans here. Okay, so we got that. The next thing we want to do now is basically create our web service clients. Now we're going to have to create two clients. The first client is going to be to our normal web service provider, which is this guy. So we're going to need the WSDL for this, or the WSDL address, so we can tell NetBeans that's where we're going to generate our code from. Okay, and we're going to call it org.wsclient.ws. This is our provider, essentially. Okay, I think we're good there. Alright, we'll let it do its thing. Okay, now got some cheat sheets here. So this is going to be WS Client to the web service. Okay, so here's our configuration screens, what we're going to have to configure for it. So let's go back to NetBeans, go to our web service here. We can edit the attributes, open this up so we can see what we're doing. Okay, come on. There we go. Okay, so now let's go up here, go back to our cheat sheet. Okay, there's really nothing to do here. So what's next? Okay, we got to configure our key store. So our key store is going to point to our client, and we need the password for that client key. Okay, so let's go get the key stores we installed in Apache. Key stores, the key store, we give it a password, which is change it, and we need, I already forgot, we need the client key. There it is, client key, and the client key is CK pass for client key pass, and all these passwords are in that script from the first video you can download from my site to build the certs. So all those passphrases are defined in there. Okay, so we set that one up. Okay, now what's next? So we have that. So we got to set up our trust store that points to our service key. Okay. Apache key stores. Here's our trust certs. Change it as the password to this. Load the alias, and this points to our service. Okay. What's next? Okay, now we got to set up our endpoints for our secure token service, because remember our call to our web service provider is also going to validate that we got a valid token. So let's set up our endpoints. We can get them from here. Okay, we're going to need our Meta Exchange endpoint to put in here, and we're going to need our STS endpoint to put in here. Okay, Alright, and I think that's all we have to do for this one. Now we have to create another web service client. And this time we're going to point this one to our STS. So let's go over here. Yeah, I'm lazy. I could have just pasted that and typed it in at the end, but okay. Then we'll have to do this. Alright, we're going to call this WS client.sts. Finish that, let it do its thing. Okay, now we're going to edit the attributes here. Okay, we don't have as much to do here. Alright, now because we're doing username authentication with symmetric keys, we have to actually put in a user ID and password here. So if we go look at our password validator, the password validator is hard-coded to have Alice and clarinet as the password, or Bob and trombone. So we're going to go with Alice and clarinet. Whoops. Clarinet. Okay, because remember now we need to authenticate to our STS. And then the STS is giving us back the token that is allowing us to pass into our provider call that trusts us. So so once we have that, then all we need to do here is set up the trust store. And let's see. STS, so there's our trust store. Okay, so we need to point to the key for the STS in this case. Okay, we'll go back here, trust store, point it, go back to our Apache keys. Alright. Okay, we need to point to our STS key. Okay, we don't need to give it a password here because it's trusted. Okay. Okay, I think that's all we need to do to configure. Now what we have to do is actually whip something together to call this stuff. So we're going to create a new package. WS client. Oops. Or WS client tester. Okay, now we'll create a new Java class. We'll call this, if I can spell it, we'll call it client tester. Okay, and now I'm going to cheat a little bit here. Okay, we're going to paste that in and fix our imports. There we go. Okay, so now what we're doing is if we go look at the generated code for our web service, we see here we have a user manager. We're using a user manager and a user manager service, and we're basically instantiating a new service, and we're calling that service to get the port, and then we're using that port to make the calls into the methods for our web service. And if you remember correctly, that code is basically creating a little user bean and passing back the bean, and we put whatever user ID we get passed in, we send back. So we don't want to print that out, so what we're going to do is print the email address out because that gets generated internally and we can be sure it's working. Another thing too I'm going to mention here is that what you can do too, which is a good thing to do, is what I usually do is keep, you can load this in a properties file, and so this way, because if you don't, when you do it without you passing in the URL, it's going to use whatever URL's in the WSDL, and that might be the dev one. You probably don't want that in production, so you want to load the URL from a properties file, create a new URL object here, and then pass that in to your service, and then to get your port to make your calls. This way, your code isn't dependent on any particular URL. So okay, so now we have that, so let's see if it actually works. not be a main class. There we go. I didn't save it. Okay, so we got our main class. Let's see if it works. Hopefully everything will be dandy. Okay, we're starting up our client. And there we go. So we were able to call it and get back the email address from our actual web service. So now let's go over here to our log. Okay, so these errors here, what's going on is because we're making the calls, and you notice when we set up our endpoints, when we configured the web service here, we didn't put in the actual WSDL. Apparently Tomcat doesn't like that, but it's still getting back the results that it wants, and we are calling into our password validator because we're printing out the user ID that we just got passed in. So it is indeed working, even though Tomcat's whining about this call. I'm going to figure out if there's a way to fix that. But anyway, that was setting up the client. So we created the secure token service, we created a secure web service, we created a client that calls the secure token service and the web service, and we were able to get a token from the secure token service, pass that into the web service provider, and run a method on the web service and get back a result. And we were able to do it with NetBeans and JDK6 and JAX-WS22 in spite of themselves. So I think if you wanted to make this a whole lot easier and you don't particularly care about having to stay on JDK6, if you move everything up to JDK7, I think this gets a lot easier, because JDK7 apparently already has JAX-WS22 in it, so you won't have to jump through some of the hoops we had to do here, like with the WebXML and the JAX-WS, and which is partly NetBeans, and then of course the endorse stuff. The other big thing here was being able to generate keys that have some kind of signing authority, which is what you would have to do in the real world rather than just test everything in development mode. Okay, hope you liked it all. See ya.